Okay, hi everybody. Today I have the absolute pleasure of talking to Gareth Graham of Frenzy Kitty Games. Hi, Gareth. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Manny?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm perfect. I'm a little excited. This is it's not
Great.
yeah, it's true. It's not every day that you get to interview somebody, and especially not in English.
Yeah,
So
no, for sure, for sure. Well, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself and about Frenzy Kitty Games?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gareth. I'm a role-playing game writer and designer from Cape Town, South Africa, and I run a little RPG publishing company called Frenzy Kitty Games. And we'll talk about the name. Yeah, so we specialize in sort of your horror and post-apocalyptic sort of genre stuff. We've done a few GM-less games and a few crowdfunding campaigns. But yeah, the games that we're most well known for, I would probably say, are Eventide, Children of the Fall, and Something Wicked would probably be our top three. But we've put out about 10 in the last 7 or 8 years. So yeah, that's us. Sure. Yeah, you can definitely see the sort of design evolution as
Mm.
it's gone along. But the first game we put out was in, I think, 2015, 2016, was called Dusk.
Mhm.
And Dusk was like a more traditional role-playing game, GM group of players, and it was set in a post-apocalyptic Mad Max kind of universe. Used like a really cool dice pool system. I love exploding dice, and you'll see that in a lot of the designs. And so yeah, we did Dusk, put it out, and on the whole, we were happy with it. But I think that looking back, I think it's always that way as like a creative person or someone who works in making things. You look back at your first thing that you made now, and it makes you cringe a little bit because of all
Yeah.
the things you see that you would want to do differently. So that was Dusk, and the reason I talk about Dusk is we kind of reinvented it years later. But so after we did Dusk, we did a few micro games, and then the next full game that we put out was called Karma.
Hmm.
And Karma is a GM-less role-playing game, and it's kind of almost a more generic sort of style system. So in the book, you've got the rules, and then it's a collection of play sets for you to tell different types of stories using these GM-less rules. And what's cool about Karma is it uses well, we call it the Karma mechanic, and essentially throughout the game, based on the actions of your characters, you'll either generate good karma or bad karma, and basically at the end of the game, where your karma balance lies will sort of modify a dice roll, and that'll help determine whether your character has like a good outcome at the end of their story or a bad one. So like if your character just keeps having awesome things happen to them all the time, by the time you get to the end of the game, maybe they're due for a bit of bad luck, or vice versa. If your character spent the whole game getting hammered by bad luck, by the end, hopefully they'll have like a positive ending because
Okay,
it's what their character deserves.
that's fire. That's
Yeah.
cool.
So that was Karma. After Karma, we did another GM-less game, which I know you guys have been playing, which is called Children of the Fall.
Hmm.
So with Children of the Fall, we took some of the things that we had done in Karma that we liked, got rid of the stuff we didn't, and combined a few elements from some other things. There's definitely inspiration from PBTA, as I'm sure you could see in there with the playbooks and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. But Children of the Fall is also a GM-less game, survival horror post-apocalyptic game. And what's cool about the game is that as the players, you play as children, aged normally between 12 and about 17. And the setting is this post-apocalyptic universe where all of the adults, everyone over 18, has just gone insane. Nobody knows why, nobody knows how it happens, but they just become these feral, bloodthirsty savages, and they just are hell-bent on destruction. And the only people that aren't affected by it are the kids. And as a result, you have these tribes of children that have grouped together to try and survive in this harsh post-apocalyptic world. And in Children of the Fall, you and your group play one of these tribes. And there's, you'll when you play the game, you'll choose like a character archetype, and then you get a playbook that gives you some information about the character and some questions that you answer both individually and as a group to help build your setting and your world. And from there, you choose one of the missions, and the missions are just sort of story frameworks. It lets you answer a few questions about, some key, bits of information about the mission, and then you just go from there. And it's GM-less, so you go around the table, players take turns framing the scenes, and there's interesting mechanisms in Children of the Fall around just sort of like whenever your character takes trauma, and there's various ways that you can interrupt other players' scenes and add complications into other players' scenes. So it's quite an interesting take on the GM-less, on the sort of the GM-less storytelling game, because it has this sort of mechanism where even if it's not your scene, if you're not framing, you still have the potential to contribute to the story in a way and interrupt it, and your agency is never completely taken away. But that's Children of the Fall, post-apocalyptic survival horror. We did a few others.
Did you? I saw you have a game called Downfall, and it was in some way similar to Children of the Fall with the topic. Did you just reuse that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Downfall was one of these little micro games that we put together. It was a bit of a challenge to myself, because I told myself, okay, I want to put together a game that fits basically on a single page. And that was a very stripped down version using a very, very loose description of a similar sort of world. So in Downfall, you play as also a group of children, although the setting isn't so clearly defined. So Children of the Fall's got a bit of an interesting history in that we had Downfall, which was this game where you play as children in an apocalypse, and then we had another micro game called Unchained, which is where you play as these sort of feral, savage creatures trying to keep your inner demon in balance.
Okay.
And we did like a poll on social media and said, which one of these would you be more interested in seeing being turned into a full game? And people said essentially, well, why don't you just combine the two? And that's kind of where the idea for Children of the Fall came from. It was combining the idea of these feral, savage humans and playing as sort of children in a world where you don't understand what's going on. And so we just combined the two, and that's where Children of the Fall came from.
Oh, that's great how things add up.
Yeah, it's always sort of interesting when you hear the origin stories of all of these things.
Absolutely.
We did a couple others. We did a game called Something Wicked, which is a pulp horror role-playing game, also quite inspired by PBTA. It's like a RPG, 2d6, very, very light, very streamlined rule set. But people seem to enjoy it because it's a very quick and easy rule set to use to play horror, and particularly pulp horror. So that's Something Wicked. That came out a little bit after Children of the Fall, and almost there. 2 more to go. Then we had Static Dawn.
Take your time.
So Static Dawn is also RPG, and this is a biopunk horror RPG. So cyberpunk was a really big thing at the time, and we love ourselves a little bit of body horror at Frenzy Kitty Games. So we thought, let's take this obsession and this sort of feeling of cyberpunk that's permeating in the mainstream and add that body horror element to it. So Static Dawn is a game set in a world that is cyberpunk, but the way people the way that cyberpunk flavor comes through is that people augment themselves, their actual bodies. And so it's a game where you play as these augmented humans in this distant future. And there's a lot of cool rules in it because we understood that like these augmentations were going to be the meat and potatoes of the game. It's really where the sort of the bulk of the player's ability to customize their character lay. We wanted to make sure that it had like mechanical implications. So one of the things that comes up in the story is, your characters can get these augmentations from a variety of different places. If they buy a very expensive high-end one, it's probably going to be a very good quality. But if they buy
and no infection.
And no infection, exactly. So what ends up happening though is a lot of them will be too cheap, and they'll go buy some backstreet one, and then your character has the risk of developing mutations from these different augmentations going sort of like interfering with one another. And there's lots of random tables where you can roll, and your character will start to mutate in certain ways, develop all these sort of weird appendages and new abilities. And
That's awesome. That's right up my alley. It's sounds like a weird David Cronenberg movie. It's just
100% David
exactly
Cronenberg.
my thing. Yeah,
you hit
perfect.
the nail on the head. Very
Yeah,
much like
great.
Videodrone. Yeah, awesome. And then the last thing that we put out, the most recent one, is a game called Eventide, which is where it's a post-apocalyptic game, and it's very much the spiritual successor to Dusk. So it's myself and the same artist. We sort of collaborated again all these years later, and we said, let's take what we did with Dusk, let's build upon the world, let's improve the rules, all new art. But it's a full new game. It's and it's definitely the biggest product we've done. It's about 300 pages, and yeah, that's kind of our big pride project at the moment. So yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic Mad Max sort of setting, but what's cool about the game is it's really streamlined character creation, pretty straightforward and easy rules, and in the book there's also quite a nice setting, and we put a lot of effort into leaving lots of room in the setting for players and GMs to explore and build up on the world themselves, but there's also a lot of material for them to use in there to help build their stories. So you've got this massive wasteland, and in the book, for example, there's 17 different tribes, and they've all got their own beliefs and their hierarchies and their affinities with other tribes, and so there's a like a diverse living apocalyptic world going on in this book, but with lots of wiggle room for the players and GMs to explore on their own. So,
I really did like the affinity thing, because it makes you it makes you think about politics in a game like that, because you have to like wiggle around. We need, I don't know, we need fuel. We have cars, but we don't have fuel. What can we give them so they give us fuel? And it makes for some really interesting narrative options.
yeah,
I really
that's
like that.
awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, so
Cool.
so Eventide's pretty cool because, as you said, you've got your characters, and then you've got the tribe affinity. So again, you can play in a group. You can have a tribe. There's like a crafting system, so your players.
It's very computer game-ish. I like that.
I was playing a lot of Rust when I was writing Eventide, so
I know that.
so you can, if you played Rust, the workbench and everything. So yeah, I definitely wanted to do like a nice crafting system, because I think that's such a key to like a successful post-apocalyptic system, a post-apocalyptic setting rather. So yeah, so that's Eventide, and then you can build vehicles, you can build buildings. It really is a nice tool set for players wanting to tell a post-apocalyptic story.
With the post-apocalyptic thing, is that a South African thing? Because I'm immediately thinking of Neil Blomkamp and District 9 and all that thing, because it was very obvious that you don't have any fantasy setting, and that for Germans that's not a typical thing, because every publishing house has a fantasy setting.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe one or two exceptions, but it's the market is flooded with fantasy.
It is, and I think that you've sort of hit the nail on the head there. I think, I love fantasy, but I don't think I have anything to add to that space that hasn't been done before, and I think that there's enough, they call them like fantasy heartbreakers, enough people's pet projects out there. They don't need another one, really. And I think that unless your game is really doing something different in the fantasy space, there's probably something out there that's close enough, that people don't necessarily need to play yours rather than that one. But also for me, I just always found the genre more interesting, the post-apocalyptic stuff. I think that it lends itself well to group storytelling, because the characters are always in a struggle and a fight for survival, and there's this desperate need to continue to push and to continue to strive to survive. And I think, for me anyway, I find that it works really well, because it's easy for the GM to give the characters a goal, an objective, something to work towards. It's one of these and the other thing that's really nice about it is, well, you said it exactly there. It's what are my characters interested in? They're not going out looking for gold pieces and jewels. They have a car, but they don't have fuel for it, and this is a problem. Why is it a problem? Well, no, maybe we need to do a supply run because someone is sick, because they need medicine, and it's over there, and it's guarded by a different tribe. It's like very easy to quickly come up with something because the stakes are so high, and the characters can be so easily incentivized to do stuff because it really is a survival a game at the end of the day.
I would also say that that's one thing that really stood out to me with your games, because as a character in let's say Children of the Fall or Eventide, I've only read Eventide, I've played Children of the Fall. It's quite apparent that you have a like a raw and a really pressing motivation to do something, and there are many post-apocalyptic games out there that can be played just like a fantasy game.
Yeah.
No, it's as if you had a fantasy game, but you painted it different.
Exactly.
And that's not at all the case with like Children of the Fall or Eventide, and I really like that.
Yeah, I think when you're putting something like that together, and it's something I always have to just tell myself, like every time you're coming up with a rule or putting anything into the game, it's like you always have to ask, is this going to help the game facilitate the kind of stories that I want people to be telling with it, So the rules, you'll find that there's this feeling of desperation in everything. There's never enough hit points, there's never enough food, there's never enough supplies, and that's by design. Because I just find that those stories just seem to work particularly well. And if you've done a post-apocalyptic game that can be played by like a fantasy game, then I think maybe like the players aren't being incentivized to do the right things. Because it shouldn't be just for gold and glory. It should be for survival.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about your own gaming biography sort of thing. What was the first tabletop? By the way, did you know, little X course, tabletop RPG is solely an English term.
Oh, really?
Because in Germany, it's kicking around miniatures. Because it's on the top of the table. You like.
Oh, wow. Okay. So do you just call it an RPG? Or?
No, we call it pen and paper.
Ah, pen and paper.
Yeah.
I like that. I prefer that, actually. A pen and paper RPG. It does sound better. It sounds more sophisticated.
I just thought I put it right out of the way because I will probably use the term pen and paper, and then I'd have to explain to you later on.
No, that works perfectly for me. I think I prefer it. That's good.
Okay. So what was your first RPG?
My first RPG was good old Advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the early 90s. That was my jam. Played a barbarian fighter. I can still remember it. A dwarven fighter, sorry.
Okay.
I can still remember it very clearly. Belatoth with his battle axe. So I started out with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. After a while, I moved into the World of Darkness stuff. So played a lot of Vampire, played a lot of some sort of vanilla World of Darkness, a little bit of Werewolf, and after that, shifted into Call of Cthulhu, and then took a little bit of a hiatus for a while, and came back a good few years later. Got back in through Numenera, of all things.
Okay.
That Monty Cook game.
The strange one.
Yes, exactly. Which, basically, once I got back into that and rediscovered what was happening in the space, especially in the RPG indie design space, where there's so much interesting stuff going on, I just haven't looked back really. So I think a pretty traditional origin story for someone who started playing in the early 90s. Got the Dungeons and Dragons, then all of a sudden we got angsty and we started playing World of Darkness. And then we thought we were being sophisticated and played Call of Cthulhu.
So what will you say of all the games that you have played that you did not design yourself? which is your favorite one? Your all-time favorite?
That's tricky. I think that for me it would probably be Call of Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something about the percentile dice that I still like. I think it's just such a clever, clean, understandable mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I'm clearly a bit of a horror lover, so it definitely scratched that horror itch for me.
Okay.
But also, I think it's a lot of nostalgia. I think I have a lot of good memories playing Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, and it's a game where you do really have memorable sessions, I think.
That's true.
You know, I don't remember a lot of my D&D games from the 90s, but I can tell you Call of Cthulhu stories that I remember. So yeah, I think definitely Call of Cthulhu would be my answer to that.
I can imagine. And you already said, what was it, Shadow Dog? Is that the last one you played?
Yeah, at the moment we're playing Shadow Dog. So I've got a RPG group here in Cape Town, and we kind of go through systems on a fairly regular basis. But at the moment we've been playing a lot of Shadow Dog, which is that old school OSR D&D thing, but really, really nicely done. And it's interesting. A while ago I had some friends who wanted to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons, so I took them through 5th edition because I thought, you know, I'll get them started with the latest one so that if they want to get into it, it's like, okay, they can go out and buy the books wherever.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, going through the character creation, even in 5th edition, which is not particularly crunchy compared to something like 3.5.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it just took forever. And when we were playing Shadow Dog, you know, it really is a game where you can roll up a character in 5 minutes. And for a D&D system, that's pretty impressive. And I was saying to the group, like, this is what people should be playing as their introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, not 5th edition. I think that, you know, something like Shadow Dog is great because it gets you into the game super quickly. And what's great is because it's so deadly, it doesn't take you half the rest of the session to roll up another character. You know, we'll be like playing a game and you'll die, and 5 minutes later you could be back in with a new character. So yeah, having a lot of fun with Shadow Dog at the moment.
You said your first game was Dusk. You said we, not you. Do you have a developing companion?
No, so I do all the writing and design myself, but I do have an artist that I work with quite a lot. He's worked together with me on most of our games. So, I mean, you've read Eventide, so you'll be familiar with all the tribe illustrations in that. So he did all of those. And he's a local Cape Town guy as well. And I try and use Cape Town artists and I try and collaborate locally as much as I can.
Yeah.
So, like all the illustrations I've ever commissioned have been from South African artists, and all the covers have been done by the same South African guy. Because it's such an underrepresented scene locally, RPG design. I mean, there really is a handful of us in South Africa who are doing it. So I definitely try and try and incorporate and collaborate with as many South African people as I can. And Jason, the artist, is just one of these people, and we just seem to work well together. His imagination is even more dark and twisted than mine, so it's just like a good combo.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, was it what? The question is, what did inspire you to write your first own game? Was it exactly that you had the itch that you did not have the one perfect game? Did you want to have the one perfect game?
You know, I don't even know if it's that. I'm one of these people where I'm always trying to figure out how the stuff works. Like you know, if it's books, then I want to know how to bind books. If it's, you know, a desk, then I want to know how to make the desk. And so it's been the same with game design for a long time. I'm super interested in how things work. And before I started designing role-playing games, I was quite interested in board game design. So I did that for a little bit before I transitioned and realized that RPGs are more my vibe. But I've always found the rules super interesting, and the systems are kind of the key focus of what I do. And it's something that I'm trying to sort of get better at, is writing more of the setting stuff, writing more of the fluff, as they call it. But for me, I just kind of wanted to see if I could put together a really cool, streamlined system that worked, because it's the mechanics that are really the thing that's the most exciting to me about a role-playing game, more than the setting, because I mean that's sort of so interchangeable. So I think it was a challenge to myself just to see if I could do it, and it's something that I always wanted to do ever since I was, you know, playing AD&D back in the day. I was like, damn, you know, what a cool thing to be able to do, to make role-playing games. So when the time came, I just thought, okay, well, let's just do it instead of talking about it.
And how long did it take you? The first game?
Dusk from beginning to end took about a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big game, and you'll notice that a lot of my games are not these monster things.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of them are under 100 pages. So Dusk, from the time that we sat down, or from the time I sat down and said that, okay, this is something that I want to do, to the book being done, I would say a year and a half, probably. Yeah.
Okay, including playtesting.
Yeah, including playtesting.
Okay, how did you approach that? Because that's my feeling. My gut feeling is that many developers like don't really do that enough,
or at all. I think a lot of stuff gets put out there.
I didn't want to put it so badly.
No, but I think it's true. I think a lot of stuff gets out there that hasn't been played really, definitely not play tested enough. So RPG playtesting is interesting. I think that, there's two parts to it. There's, do the rules work and do the mechanisms work? And that's something that you can figure out through playtesting and through like playtesting on your own, simulated stuff, simulating a combat, rolling for both sides, seeing what happens, and it's very easy to quickly spot balance issues that way. Mm-hmm. So there's the mechanics and making sure that they work, but then getting it in front of players, and especially in front of like a blind playtest group, so a game that I'm not a part of, and just seeing if the rules are working in a way to help the players tell those kinds of stories, and if I'm sort of playtesting or I'm watching someone play the game and I look at a rule and think, gosh, that's actually getting in the way of the horror or, the exciting survival aspect, then, when in doubt, just cut it out. And so I think that a lot of the mechanical stuff can be done, but you really have to get it in front of players to see if it works as a tool to tell those kinds of stories. Yeah.
What do you do with like bits of rules, mechanisms, whatever, or ideas, maybe just basic ideas that don't fit? You just can't get them to work properly. Do you just store them somewhere until it's time to remember? And, there is something.
So I've got a Google Drive where I have all of my stuff, and there's hundreds of folders in there. Some of them with a document with 2 sentences on, just an idea for a game. So I do try to just write all of that stuff down and keep it somewhere. Whether or not I'm ever going to go back to it, I don't know. But I definitely do try to sort of like just keep track of every little idea, because you never know. And some of those turn into Eventide, and some of them turn into Children of the Fall. So
sometimes when I scan my hard drive, I see files that I have carried with me over various PCs, which are more than 20 years old. And it's just 10 lines or whatever, but I just cannot bring it over me to kill them.
No, exactly. You're sentimental now at this point. It's an emotional connection.
You know exactly you're never going to use it, never ever, but...
Oh, no. I've got hard drives in the cupboard behind me that I know I'm never going to go onto, but I will never take what's on them off, Yeah. I know that they're there, and that's what's important.
Okay, let's see. Is there a game that you wrote that you are especially proud of? Maybe because of the mechanism or the overall product?
I think the two obvious ones would be Eventide, and I'm proud of Eventide because of the product that it is. I think as a book, even the layout and that sort of thing, I think it came out really nicely, and I'm very happy with Eventide. I mean, obviously there's things I would do differently now, but I think that in terms of like a beautiful book, Eventide is the best thing that we've done. And the other one is Children of the Fall, because I just see it being played, and in terms of it just seems that game just seems to have connected with some people, and I don't know why, but it's really nice to watch people play it, and just to see the kinds of stories that people come up with, because it really is a tool set for telling interesting apocalyptic stories. And what's great is because it's GM-less, no two stories are even close to being the same. So I think Children of the Fall is good because I think it nails that balance of a rule set that works and is interesting, but is light enough and gets out of the way to let the storytelling really shine. So that would be my answer, probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Eventide and Children of the Fall.
So, what was it that made you want to develop a GM-less game? Because that is very, like, I would say for the German market, it's still quite peculiar. You don't see that very often.
Yeah.
I think it is like for myself, I can speak from experience. I admit I have quite some problems getting into GM-less gaming.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a quite different thing. Because
yeah,
what's hard for me is, for example, to combine my character view and going to the I think it's called the auctionary narrator or whatever, like the one who tells the story, but
yes,
jump again into my character and switch back and forth. And if there are other characters involved, I talk to myself all the time, and that's quite hard for me to,
playing over NPCs.
Yeah, to get the point across. I would really like to try it more. We still have an ongoing round.
Yeah.
Right now, I was part of the first round. Like I said, Cassandra's loving it to death. They're playing it over and over again, and I think they want you to check each and every mission there is, and then repeat.
Oh, that's fantastic!
And it's very funny because we chose as the setting backdrop, we chose your typical German holiday region.
But that's awesome. I mean, it's like in that Dawn of the Dead. People remember it because it was set in a shopping mall. It's like the setting adds so much to those kinds of stories.
Absolutely, yeah. One of my favorite films. Perfect.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's definitely the best Romero film. I think we can agree on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I did like the second one as well.
Oh yeah.
Dawn of the Dead too. That was like radioactive stuff.
Yeah. No, that was I mean, he's great though. Was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So sorry, I got distracted now. We're talking about GM-less games.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Right.
So what inspired a GM-less design? So GM-less games was something that I had never really heard of. Long before I started work on Children of the Fall, and when I discovered them, it was through a designer called Jim Pinto.
Yeah, I know him. I know him. Not personally, but
you're familiar with his work.
Yeah, King of the Day, I believe.
Yeah, King for a Day. Yeah, that's
King for a Day. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Such a great product. Yeah.
Amazing, and he put out a lot of GM-less stuff over a time, and I just kind of really liked what he was doing because it was dark and interesting. And what I really love about a GM-less game is that even your lightest, most rules light stuff, the GM in a traditional system will still have to put in some preparation. I mean, there's systems that really help to alleviate that. But at the end of the day, if you want to play a traditional RPG, at some point the GM is going to have to sit down before the time and put some work in.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But what's nice about a GM-less game is that with absolutely no preparation, you can pull it off the shelf, grab some people around the table, and it takes a lot of the pressure off the GM. So I think that's kind of what's so appealing about it. And I've always in all the GM-less games I've played, the story always goes in interesting ways, and it's in ways that you could never have anticipated. And that's what's so cool about it, because you've got 4 people or 5 people's imaginations all chipping into the story in like a turn order. So you do get some interesting, unusual stuff happening. And the fact that you don't need to do any preparation beforehand is just a bonus, really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But what you said is true. It is definitely tricky to get into, especially in the beginning. I think what always surprises me about GM-less games is like the first time you play, how awkward it can feel, and then how quickly that awkwardness goes away and you just actually get into it. After a couple of rounds, it just becomes easier and easier, and before you know it, even people who at the beginning were super quiet sitting around the table, just because it's the shared experience, they feel maybe less pressured. It works really well.
Yeah, that's what you said. I did witness that with the guys playing, because
Yeah.
you can really see from session to session how more like assertive they get, because they feel better, and they it's you have to I think you have to practice bringing like the right amount of uh what can I say it to be invasive, just the right amount, not to kill off anything that somebody else on the table said. Just to you have to
Yeah,
you have to
yeah.
practice bringing a consistent story to the table.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, no,
that's
like
I found that I saw that over the sessions that they got used to it.
yeah, and I think there has to be sort of an unspoken agreement that look, we're all in this, together. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to tell a cool story here. So you hope that you don't have players that are going to sort of make that difficult.
Yeah,
But you're right. You do definitely get more and more into it. And as you say, like now your players are like, it's my time to shine. This is my scene.
yeah.
Stepping up to the plate, and I'm going to go for it.
That's exactly the point, because I think Cassandra would be mad at me if I wouldn't at least say it, because that's exactly one point that she loves about GMless games, because you have like, if you're a player, you have a really good character concept, you have a backstory, you have like certain traits that you really would like to see on the table, and then you are a player in a GM's vision of the game, whatever you
Yeah,
play, and in his vision, your concept has doesn't really have a place.
yeah.
And that happens so often, because especially if you have like pre-written adventures or whatever, you have like by adventures or so.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
doesn't really matter what character you have, because the story is the story.
Exactly. Your character is incidental. That story was going to
Yeah,
happen one way or
yeah,
another, whether you were a gnome or a human paladin. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
And the thing is that Cassandra often says that, like, she's really working toward building up the story of a character, interacting with the other characters on the table, building something up, and then the
yeah,
GM comes with like his, I don't know, his weird non-player characters, or his whatever, his vision for the adventure,
yeah.
and everything that you build up over, let's say, 2 or 3 sessions, maybe it gets like killed off, or it's ignored, or whatever, and that cannot happen with jamless games,
No, because
because
you have
you
the
you
control.
yeah, you have the control as a player, and you say what's happening. And I think
Exactly.
that's a real big bonus, and that's what Cassandra loves about it.
Yeah, it gives, like you say, it gives all the players a chance to shine,
Yeah,
really, and I think it's easy, especially for newer players, to get like a little bit steamrolled by more experienced players who say, no, this is the plan, like you get a lot of that alpha gaming, especially in like combat heavy fantasy games.
mm,
And yeah, the GM-less thing, because the agency is so shared, you don't have like one player speaking for the group consistently, or your carefully laid plans getting destroyed by the GM just sort of completely
or
flipping the
the
script.
or the other way around. I mean, that's also a cliche, right? No,
Yeah,
no, like no adventure
so,
survives first contact with players.
yeah, that's
Like,
an occupational hazard of being a
yeah,
GM. I think that
true.
that, that comes with the territory. They
Yeah,
can't be too surprised.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Uh, is there any rule mechanic that comes to your mind that you did discard because it did not work out for you?
Yeah, 100%. So we're working on a game at the moment, I can tell
Hmm.
you, and it's a sort of an 80s slasher horror game.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're putting the rules together. I was looking at like health and combat and that sort of thing. And one of the things that we had in it was in Eventide, and it was also in Something Wicked, was this idea of this health clock.
Hmm.
And what's really cool about the health clock is, you take damage, and up to a certain point, your health will heal automatically. But beyond that point, you'll start to deteriorate unless you get assistance. So
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
this idea of like bleeding out, and it's like a curve. It gets faster and faster, and that's a really cool mechanism. But when we put it into the slasher horror, we were saying, you know, in slashers, people don't like take a few wounds and then go lie in the corner and quietly bleed to death. It's like you get hit and your head gets chopped off, and that's it.
It's more realistic, right? Like the clock.
Yeah. And so in a slasher, you want those like dramatic deaths, not those slow, predictable deaths. So
Colorful
that was a mechanic
deaths.
yeah, exactly. I love that mechanism, and it works in certain games. But for the story we were trying to tell, we're like, people in slashers don't quietly go and wither away and slowly die. They die very quickly usually.
Okay. And is there on the contrary, is there some mechanic that you are especially proud of, that you like would say that is I don't know, your best maybe?
I don't know. That's tricky. There's a lot of stuff that I like, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm proud of. I think the core mechanic in Children of the Fall is pretty cool with the complications, you know, the story points and all of that. I like the downfall system in there. But also I love just the core mechanism in Eventide. There's nothing better than just rolling a handful of D6s, you know?
Yeah.
There's something super satisfying, and the exploding dice. What's so great about that exploding dice is it creates these moments where you have players standing up around the table and they can't believe it's happening, you know? I mean, if you've played a dice pool game, you'll know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you get those miracle rolls where it's like, damn, there's no reason on paper that my character should be able to do this, but, you know, miracles happen, so I rolled 5 sixes, deal with it. Yeah, so I think that's those are really cool mechanisms that I'm quite proud of.
Do you have any like a secret tip, one game that you would really like to, it doesn't have to be one of yours, just one game that you are especially fond of at the moment, maybe one that's not that well known, that people should know of?
Yeah, let me think for a second. That's interesting. Yeah, I think, you know, it's hard to pick one. There's like so much interesting stuff happening, but I'm always quite interested in the stuff in the indie space that's doing things a little bit differently. So like, you know, a lot of Jim Pinto stuff. There's a lot of really interesting PBTA stuff out there. Games that let you play things that a lot of other games don't. Like, for example, The Warren is a PBTA game where you play like a rabbit. There's lots of really, really cool, interesting stuff out there. So I can't really pick one off the top of my head right now. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer for you
no
than
problem,
that.
no problem at all. I think I wouldn't be able to answer it myself. You started a bit about it, the gaming scene in South Africa.
Yeah.
You already said it's itsy bitsy, or
so, you know, it's slowly getting better. I think for players, I think it's never been a better time to be a game player in South Africa. The books are now more widely available than ever before. I mean, when I started playing, you could not find these books for hell or high water. It was something that you had to. There was one little shop in Cape Town that stocked them, and it was this weird little esoteric bookshop that always had incense burning, and it was like
Cape Town is not especially small. I mean,
no, exactly. You know, so now you can get your D&D books anywhere. But from a designer perspective, there's a lot more people in South Africa working in board game design than RPG design. Not really sure why that is, but yeah, in terms of RPG designers, there's a cool group of us down here who are doing it, and yeah, not a whole lot else, unfortunately. But it is growing. But yeah, it definitely feels a little bit stronger on the board game side now. But I think that's kind of a universal thing. I know a lot of folks who were at Gen Con this year were also saying that like the board games far outweighed the RPG stuff.
I would also say that's always been
yeah.
Like, but are there conventions in Cape Town, South Africa?
Yeah, so there are smallish conventions. We have a couple every year. We had like South African Comic Con this year, which was pretty cool. There's a fantasy and RPG convention called Dragonfire that happens every year, and that's been going forever and ever. but not a huge variety of conventions. Yeah, unfortunately not. It's also just not we don't have a huge convention. It's not a huge convention culture here, I think. Well, not yet anyway, just because it's not something that people, it's not something we get a lot of. Now we're getting more and more, but yeah, it's definitely something that's slowly taking off, I think.
Okay. And how about online gaming, streaming? Are there a lot of South African like TTRPG streamers or gamers or I mean it's English. It's quite universal so you can game all over the world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely a couple for sure. Yeah, I think lots of streamers just sort of tackling the geek space, so RPG, board games, computer games, all that sort of stuff. You get a lot of that. In terms of exclusively tabletop content, there's a couple, but yeah, definitely room for a lot more, I would say.
No. And that's even something we say in Germany, and we have like compared to the American market, the German market is tiny. We have there are a lot of people who don't really like if you're a publishing house and you do like a crowdfunding or you like set up prices for a book that you have to print, that has to be illustrated and whatever, and it's a translation.
And that's why the PDF thing is also so nice with RPGs. Is it's like, with a board game you can't really sell a digital version in the same way that with a PDF you can, just because it's just a book, So,
but exactly the reason why I'm telling this, or why I'm referring to this, is because you cannot print. The market is so small. You have like 200 pieces that you print.
Yeah.
Like, because you have the crowdfunding has 100, and then you print another 100, so you have them for the bookstores or whatever, or the gaming stores. And that's why it's so expensive. Like if you're on the American market, or you print, I mean, if you print the Dark Eye or D&D books, then okay, you can print 2,000. That's a different thing. And if it's English language, you can probably print even more, like 10 to 20,000, whatever, and have second and fourth. Like Pathfinder, I think, has like the 6th print run.
It's unreal.
And they have tens of thousands of books, and that's why they make it so expensive, right? But we have to like take 90 euros for this book, or 2 books, because it's like 200 pieces. Yeah, and that's what people don't understand. And I could imagine that, and if you print books in South Africa, where the market is even smaller.
Yeah, so for us, it's very, very little of our market, unfortunately, comes from South Africa. I think it's still quite a, role-playing games are taking off here, but it's still very much like the mainstream ones. You got your D&D, your Call of Cthulhu is very popular now. There's a lot of other stuff, obviously Pathfinder and that sort of thing. But in terms of indie games, there's not really a huge following in South Africa at the moment, which is why I'm super grateful for things like Drive-Thru RPG, which has got, like a lot of the print-on-demand thing is huge. I mean, it's such a little side hustle thing. I mean, we don't do it for the money.
Obviously,
and we couldn't afford to do I'd obviously love to do a beautiful print run of Eventide with like beautiful hardcover, but just for the volumes of books that we're selling, it's just not feasible. Yeah. So at this stage, the print on demand is really like such a huge lifeline to indie RPG authors. It can't be stressed enough how big of a deal print on demand is for designers.
Absolutely. I mean, it's even for crowdfunding. Yeah. It used to be. I mean, back in the days, you had something like take the economical risk of publishing a book, so you pay everything in advance.
Exactly, and hope someone buys it.
Yeah, and you have so much trust in your product that you like invest in all the illustrations, whatever, and you hope as many people buy it, and you have calculated it right. And you don't even do that anymore. So it's even with crowdfundings, like the calculation you did is not very reliable in times like this, because like paper prices go up, printing prices go up and down like this, especially with COVID and stuff. And even if you have calculated it, you might have to go with print on demand, because the I don't know, what's the word now? I have to, like, the print run, is print run the right word?
Yeah,
Because
print run.
it's so small, only 200 pieces.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it's not feasible to do like a real printing run with it.
No, exactly. I mean, it wouldn't be feasible for us, definitely. And also, I think that just looking at the market, me being in South Africa, it wouldn't really make sense for me to print books here, because so few people, the scene is so small here at the moment. And if I look at where the books are sold and are successful, it is those places that you'd expect, America, the UK, but then also a lot of Europe, Germany, obviously you guys, and Italy, Spain. So pretty much everywhere but Africa. For now, I'm sure things will change.
Yeah. That's the benefit of the English language, right? So
yeah, and the whole thing is, with Drive-Thru RPG, I would never have been able to get access to those markets if I was having to print books offset style and try and find a distributor in every one of those regions. It would never happen. So the fact that I can just send a link to someone and they can click a button and get a book in their mailbox is pretty amazing.
That's true. Yeah, that's really great.
It's actually never been an easier time to be an RPG writer or publisher now, because the only thing that is holding you back is you, really, with print on demand and everything.
And the like we said before, the diversity in role-playing games, and really sticking out of the masses.
That's the hard part, I suppose. Yeah,
true. Yeah. What's to be expected next from you?
Awesome. So the next game that we have coming out is going to be called Escape from Lake Blackwood. It is a 80s slasher horror RPG with like board game elements to it. So it's your classic sort of slasher set at a summer camp. The players camp
Lake Voorhees.
Exactly, very Friday the 13th. Yeah. But what's really cool is it's got like lots of random tables. The layout of the camp is randomly generated every time you play, and there's lots and lots of stuff that we've put into the system to help the GM really tell these kinds of stories. And we've really tried to build a system that is designed around really putting the player into the shoes of these characters who are fighting to survive. So there's, the book starts, we've got a full graphic novel at the start of the book that's been illustrated, and there's I don't want to give too much away, and also because we're still working on it and fine-tuning it, but it's going to be pretty exciting slasher horror experience. And if that works well, we'd like to turn it into a series tackling different genres of horror. So, maybe the haunted house next, or body horror. Who knows? Yeah.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Thanks so much.
Do you have any last words you want to leave us with?
No, I think that, if you want to check out any of the games, go to frenzykittygames.com, and whatever you play, just make sure that you're having fun and rolling nice and high.
Gareth, thank you very much for taking the time to chat.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, for me too. Thank you for the games. We'll be keeping on playing them.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear what you think of Eventide once you have a chance.
Yeah. I will take that under my wings to GM that, because
thank you guys so much for the support. Really, it's been awesome to see the games being played and to hear that you guys have been enjoying them. It means a lot to me. You kind of create these things in a vacuum a little bit, and for me to hear that there's a group of people in Germany playing something that I wrote, it's like very exciting. That's why it gives me the drive to keep doing it. So
Perfect.
I'm so glad.
So, Gareth, thank you very
Yes.
much.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. That was the interview with Gareth Graham from Frenzy Kitty Games from South Africa. Bye-bye.